And thank you very much. The next panel we'll have today is older Americans who remain active performers. First, we'll have Mr. Jerry Lawrence of Muncie, Indiana, and Dr. William Chase of San Clemente, California. Please proceed, Mr. Lawrence.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I want to admit one thing here. I never heard of a musical specialist in my life, therapist. I live so far back in the woods that maybe they haven't reached us. I imagine they have them in Indianapolis, but to my knowledge, Muncie has never had a music therapist. And I think it's wonderful that there are people like this that I found that are working at this, and it's really wonderful. Music has always meant so much to me. I've played music, one instrument or another, since I was 5 years old. Not well, but I played it. I had a stroke, and I was paralyzed on the right side. My speech was gone. And you know, the first thing, and about the only thing that come in my mind right then, I'll never play or sing again. They took me home from the hospital, and I had a small keyboard in the family room, and believe me, that's where I lived. Every chance I got, I went to that keyboard. I had to move that arm. I had to get my fingers to work again. I finally moved my arm, and I played with my fist doubled up. Anything, just make music. It was everything to me. I progressed. I could play less than a minute at a time when I started, and I finally got up to 45 minutes. And I told my wife, I said, hey, I'm going back to work because 45 minutes is all a musician plays. He can rest 15 minutes then, and I can go back to And I did. I have a band, combo, and I went over to the place they were playing, and they wanted me to sing with them that night. One song, anyway. And you know, I did, but I shouldn't have. I never lost out on the beat of the music, but the words, I didn't think those words come out of my mouth. I was thinking right, but the words were all together different. It was easier to sing, though, the words than to talk them. The rhythm of it really helped me. It's the only job I ever had in my life that I can be worn out, tired, go to work, and relax and feel good by the time I get through. It relaxes me, and it's terrific, I think, when you can be a part of music. I play for nursing homes and Alzheimer's wards, and what a difference music makes in their lives. You go in and there's no expression. They're sitting there. You start to play, and there's a little light that comes in their eyes. They get up. They dance with each other. They dance around the floor by themselves. It's terrific to see them that, you know, they may not know their name or where they're from or who comes to see them, but they know the words to I Want a Girl and When You Wore a Tulip, and they'll sing it loud and clear. And the attendants worked hard with these people to give them a little joy in their life. I play for a hospital, for the stroke club, and I look around and see people that there for the grace of God go I. They're paralyzed. But you know, when you play, you can see a little finger moving or a toe that taps to rhythm. Music gets through to them. My wife has been right with me every step of the way. Without her help and understanding, I couldn't have made it. But music was so strong in me. I had to come back and play music. I thought my wife was very strict with me. There was no sympathy that I could find in her. But I found out later that sympathy doesn't work when you're trying to move after a stroke. It's very rewarding for me to play nursing homes and hospitals. You become friends with these people, and they look forward to your coming back and playing for them. Many of them never have a visitor. I make up song sheets, and they really enjoy singing back in the music of their life. We have, they can remember songs. We'll have what is it? I'll play songs and have them guess them and guess the years they come out. And it's amazing how they know the songs and close to when they come out. It's been a very rewarding experience for me, and I never knew that people were music therapists. I'm so glad that they're here. Thank you very much.
Dr. Chase?
Well, I'm William A. Chase.
Pull that up. We can't hear you. It's a direct microphone. You have to speak right into it.
I am William Anthony Chase. I've been a doctor for the last 54 years, and I'm 78 years young. And I've never really heard much about musical therapy, but I've been aware of the fact that it is probably the oldest treatment modality on this planet. And it begins with the mother giving aid and comfort to her newborn baby. Only women have the capability of making those wonderful clucking, crooning, God knows what kind of sounds which get down into the baby and cause that, and which cause them to, the babies to give up screaming and crying and going to sleep. Men don't have that capability, but women do. Anyway, frankly, I never heard of musical therapy, as this gentleman said just a short while ago, until this whole thing came up before my attention. However, I'm a volunteer. I'm in active practice of medicine still. And I also am a volunteer for the Beverly Manor Convalescent Hospital and also at the Adult Daycare Center in San Clemente, California. And there I had the privilege and the pleasure to have seen with my own eyes exactly what music can do with people who are otherwise almost completely unable to handle themselves physically, emotionally, or mentally. Now, it's a great pleasure for me to go there because I know what's going to happen. When I first began, the people would be very listless, lethargic, and very withdrawn to the point where they would hardly notice me tuning up my violin. But then as I would play, they would begin to stamp their feet and to clap their hands and even sing. And the people who were very antisocial among each other, who had never noticed the person sitting alongside of them or behind them or in front of them, all of a sudden would interact with their neighbors, which is a very important thing in a convalescent hospital where patients are crowded together. There is a lot of hostility that can develop if one patient's wheelchair crosses another patient's and maybe snags a foot or something like that. Anyway, I have noticed that the interpersonal relationship between patients improves very greatly. I have always also noticed the fact that television and radio does not seem to provide the same sort of same sort of reaction in these people that live music invariably does. The life which is contained in music which is produced right then and there seems to penetrate into their lives and stimulates them to all kinds of beautiful activity. I was playing at the Beverly Manor one day, and we were playing a lively song, and all of a sudden a woman who had been wheelchair bound for years began to stamp her feet and move her fingers and wave her hands, and then suddenly she began to ease up out of the wheelchair, and believe it or not, she arose to her feet and began to tap her feet and dance and shuffle dance in time to the music. And the head nurse of the hospital saw that, and she rushed out because she was afraid that the patient was going to fall. Anyway, she grabbed her, and she danced along with the patient until the music ended. And now, every time I go there, this same person greets me with a smile, where before there was nothing, no recognition whatsoever. And she invariably gets up and dances with somebody from the nursing staff. The feeling, I've asked the nurses, how long does this feeling of euphoria last after a session of playing like this? And she says generally for at least the rest of the afternoon. And then gradually they creep back into their former self, and it would be very nice if this sort of thing could be provided on a daily basis. I feel strongly that government, which throws money away in very peculiar situations. I don't want to be hostile to government. I love government because however, there should be some way whereby musical therapy can be provided on an almost daily basis to these places where they need them so badly. I feel very strongly that musical therapy is something that is going to pick up momentum, and which is going to be a very, very important part of our treatment program, much better than medicine.
Dr. Chase?
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could relate to Senator Cohen and me, the woman that accompanies you. Would you tell us about her?
Yes, yes. She is 70 years old, and she has short-term memory loss, and I don't want to put a name on that, but I think you all know what I mean.
Been 70 years young.
Yeah, she's 70 years old, more or less. But when she plays the piano, there is no hesitation about what she's going to do there. I never tell her what I'm going to play. I just start playing, and within 2 bars, she has the melody, which she dredges up from way down deep in her soul. And she plays the thing faultlessly with me, and the people just love it.
You play the violin, she plays the piano.
I play the violin, she plays the piano, that's right.
How did you discover she could do this?
Well, frankly, I don't know, but one day I happened to be there and making rounds at the Beverly Manor Convalescent Hospital, and I heard her play. And I said, gee, she sounds like a very good possible accompanist for me, and we got together, and surely enough, we hit it off immediately. And
Can you converse with her when she's not playing the piano?
yes, except that she had her memory loss is very, very sad because, like at a certain, we were invited to play. Red light going on. We were invited to play at the Presbyterian Church there, and I accepted the invitation. And her husband had an operation very recently, and was unable to take her down there. So I picked her up and I took her down there. We played, and at the very end of the thing, she approached my wife and says, "I don't know how I got here. How am I going to get home?" And I took her down there, and she completely had no memory of my having done so. So Alzheimer's is a very sad thing. However, she was able to dredge up all these beautiful songs from way back. And we never discuss what we're going to play. I'll just start something, and she comes right along with it. And especially the more cheerful songs, you know, the lively songs are important to her and also to the people who listen.
Mr. Lawrence, what musical instrument do you play?
I play keyboard now. I played saxophone and clarinet for about 30 years.
And you said that after you had your stroke and when you were in the recovery process, when you were paralyzed on the right side, you had an urge to play music.
Oh, yes.
And when you first started playing, did you try the keyboard? Is that what you worked on?
Yes.
And
yes.
you said you couldn't play with your fingers, is that right?
Yes, they wouldn't bend. I couldn't open my hand. And I finally got my arm to move so I could put my hand up on the keyboard. And I know it doesn't sound too good, but it's better than nothing. I just rolled the hand, you know, on the keys, and you can make music. You can make music anywhere.
And you feel without any question that the therapy that you conducted on yourself has led to your recovery?
Oh, yeah.
No doubt about that.
No
Senator
doubt.
Cohen?
Dr. Chase, based on your experience with the residents at the center, would you see these musical sessions as activity that enhances the quality of life of the residents, or medical therapy, or both?
I have no question about that. Absolutely, yes.
So it would be both enhancement of quality of life
Yes.
and medical therapy. Is it
Yes.
as effective, from what you've observed, as, let's say, speech therapy? You have the same kind of results if you have a speech therapist go in, or is it more effective?
Well, I feel that at the moment of subjecting the patient to musical therapy, the results are very impressive, and they're immediately discernible. And I don't know of any medicine that's of any particular benefit in Alzheimer's. And if you have disturbed patients, you have them under sedation, which only intensifies the problem there, because people tend to become sensitized and to become habituated.
How long have you been playing the violin?
I began when I was about 7 years of age. I had a teacher who was a very fine violinist, but he did not teach me how to even read music. He'd put up some music and he'd play it, and I'd play it back at him, and he thought I knew what I was doing. I still don't know what a key is. And one of these days I'm going to sit down and I'm going to study it. I'm really ashamed to admit it, but I don't know what a key is.
But in addition to your profession as a doctor, I assume that you have played over the years for groups?
I've played over the years Christmas caroling at Christmas Eve. The whole neighborhood comes out, follows me like a...
Well, I was somewhat surprised when you said you didn't realize the therapeutic effect of music, having been a lifelong musician like Mr. Lawrence.
I only played at family gatherings and Christmas and stuff like that. I never tried to attach any medical connotation to it. I did buy a violin and a fiddle, rather, in Brisbane, Australia, and I took it up to New Guinea during the Sidor campaign, places you never heard of, battles you never heard of. And I was known there as the crazy American doctor who played the violin on the front lines. But it wasn't true. I never took them to the front lines. I used them in the back areas.
Thank you very much. It's been very helpful to us.
We appreciate very much your patience and most of all your testimony. It's been enlightening. We look forward to working with you in the years to come. The final panel today will be experts in music and health. We'll hear from Dr. Alicia Ann Clare, Dr. Frank Wilson, and Dr. Matthew Lee. Dr. Clare is from Topeka, Kansas. Dr. Wilson's from Danville, California, and Dr. Lee is from New York City. Please come forward. We'll first hear from Alicia Ann Clare. Please proceed.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today to increase awareness of music therapy as a valid and efficacious treatment and healthcare service for older Americans. I'm the director of music therapy at the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas, and a research associate at the Calmery O'Neill Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Topeka, Kansas. Both these institutions are very long supporters of music therapy, but I speak not as a representative of either of those institutions today, but as a long-time practicing professional music therapist who's been working with and conducting research with elderly Americans since 1977. I began my clinical music therapy work with well elderly persons in developing and redeveloping their musical skills to give them opportunities to demonstrate their abilities and competencies to succeed musically. Some of these people included people such as Narcissus Abela, who was a World War II veteran who survived the Bataan Death March and who learned to play the clarinet when he was 82 years old, something that he said he always wanted to do. Evangeline, a widow, who lived in a farmhouse 15 miles from town, very isolated, who learned to play the guitar in the early 70s, and who said she used it to play away her blues and to play when she was happy. And she said it didn't really matter how it sounded because it was just the dog and her anyway, and it didn't matter what he thought. But this lady later developed breast cancer. She had surgery. She had follow-up chemotherapy. And the music therapy group was very supportive of her during that time. It also helped to motivate her to get back into her social contacts as she came back to join us again. I also did music therapy programming with the frail elderly in residential care homes. Here, people such as Grace and Ann, who both had had strokes and were paralyzed on one side, played a guitar or played an autoharp together, something that neither of them could do alone, but together they could master it. There were others who seemed too depressed to socialize, but they sang when the music therapist conducted sessions, and they all danced in their own way. More recently, I have conducted music therapy sessions with persons diagnosed with dementia and with their families. Music therapy has provided opportunities for social integration with people who have really lost touch and who have become severely dysfunctional, to bring them into the here and now. It seems to provide a time out from the terrors and the confusion that they suffer. It also gives families an opportunity to maintain contact with their loved ones far into the late stages of the disease. Spouses have played music with one another, they've danced, they've drummed together. Lately, Marie, the wife of Bill, said after dancing for the first time with him in music therapy, she said, "He held me in his arms. It's the first time in years that he's just held me." I have a short videotape with me today that shows the powerful effects of music in one of the patients we work with, who is severely regressed and confused.
We have a technical difficulty. Oh, it's fixed.
In conclusion, my clinical perceptions and research conclusions support the need for legislation and regulation that influences the availability of music therapy services to older Americans and to other populations. It also supports the possibility of using federal funds to conduct research projects that include demonstration projects, basic research, and clinical outcome research. A modest amount of federal funds could be extremely helpful and have a major impact on the physical and mental well-being of a growing population of older Americans. Thank you.
Your full statement will be made part of the record. We'll now hear from Dr. Lee.
Senator Reid, Senator Cohen, Senator Pryor, I'm grateful for this opportunity to testify this morning concerning the relationships of music, medicine, and rehabilitation medicine. Currently, I serve as professor and acting chairman of the Rusk Institute of Rehabilitation Medicine, New York University, and also as adjunct professor of music. And recently, I edited a book entitled Rehabilitation, Music, and Human Well-Being. The late Howard A. Rusk, in his preface to this book, wrote, "To rehabilitation medicine, it adds a new and vibrant dimension, and to patients, a holistic approach to care. Anecdotal evidence and personal clinical experience acknowledges the major role music and the creative art therapies plays in the healing process. What is exciting today is that we have methods that can measure the physiological and the biochemical effects of music. For example, at New York University, it appears that through magnetic imaging that we have located an area of the brain which deals with singing, separate from the speech center. We note that patients, when you play music that they like, their endorphin level will be increased. That perhaps explains why there is pain abatement. Also, if one plays the music that you enjoy, if you needed surgery, if we play it pre, during, and post-surgery, one would require less pain medications and less anesthesia. As documented, falls, respiratory problems, physical rehabilitation, chronic pain of the elderly impact greatly on medical costs. Cost containment, cost effectiveness are major issues. I strongly believe that with current methodologies and technologies in music, we can, 1, maintain functional independence at home, 2, preclude and prevent hospitalization, and if hospitalized, to reduce stay, in addition to decreasing drug utilization and to improve cognition in our elderly and young. To achieve the above, so that music can be a part of the mainstream of medicine, systematic research through demonstration projects, basic research, and certainly clinical outcome research must be done. Current attitudes concerning the elderly serve to set minimal levels of aspirations, although the overwhelming evidence clearly indicates that this view is wrong, that this view is unfair and contrary to the facts. Music and music therapy enhance the functional capabilities of the elderly as well as to raise their level of aspiration and potential to more realistic levels. I cannot think of anyone who could more eloquently articulate the role that music plays than my friend and your colleague, the late Senator Jacob Javits. In his keynote address during the 4th International Symposium of Music and Rehabilitation, which was to be his last public appearance, he states, "This is a unique therapy and is a great boon to the disabled, as it should be, as it must be, seriously undertaken as an element of medicine." I thank the committee, Senator Pryor, for inviting me to testify today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. We'll hear now from our last witness, Dr. Frank Wilson. Dr. Wilson.
Thank you, Senator Reid, Senator Cohen. I wish to also thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's hearing, which I think has probably already proven to be a landmark occasion in the history of this committee, and I'm honored to do what I can to advance the result. To begin, I would like to share with you several conclusions drawn from more than a decade of involvement in the issue that you are addressing here today. All humans are innately musical. By this I mean we are biologically endowed with the ability to create and respond to music. This aptitude is as deeply rooted in the nervous system and as integral to life as is the gift of language. Neither age nor physical disadvantage is a bar to active participation in music or to sharing in its diverse and substantial benefits. Musical achievement, what we do with our musical birthright, has far more to do with training and experience than with what is called talent. The process can be started at any age and requires little more than an eager student and a sympathetic, skillful teacher. It is never too late to learn. Music has great potential in both medical and rehabilitation treatment protocols. It is largely ignored as a subject for medical research, and it is significantly underutilized in medical practice. As a neurologist, I am intrigued at the multiplicity of musical forms and its remarkable influence on human development and maturation. I suspect that something like the following is true. Music arises spontaneously from a brain whose operations are inherently rhythmic, harmonic, patterned, and sequential. Perhaps this is why it is both a stimulus and a powerful organizer of movement, thought, language, emotion, personal action, and social interaction, and why it retains this power throughout life. If I may, I would like now to describe briefly the path that led me to these conclusions. I am a neurologist, and I began full-time practice with the Permanente Medical Group of Northern California 23 years ago. My own development as a physician has been deeply influenced by many colleagues and a professional situation emphasizing high-quality health care that is both humanitarian and economical. It is fundamental to our philosophy that a patient become an informed, active partner through education and the fostering of personal attitudes and strategies which promote health and well-being. To me, education for life and education for health mean the same thing. It was not obvious to me until just a few years ago that adding education for music would give us a third component in this strategy for a fuller and healthier life. I owe it to my own piano teacher, Lillian Bauer Cox, that I discovered I didn't have to spend the rest of my life standing outside the window looking in at the musicians. Lillian, who was my daughter's piano teacher, had asked me to give a talk on the brain to her students. They'd love to know how the brain makes the fingers go, is how she put it. I gave the talk, and Lillian rewarded me with 3 free piano lessons. Who knows, she said, you might enjoy it. She was right. For 5 years, I studied piano with her, having so much fun I could not understand why more people my age didn't study music. The answer, I decided, had more to do with the way people were taught than with any innate incapacity to learn. So I decided to write a book about my experience. The book, called Tone Deaf and All Thumbs, was intended to refute the widely held belief that music belongs to specially gifted people who demonstrate their precocity at the age of 3 and are put on the Juilliard admission list when they are 5 or 6. The book brought me quite a few interesting letters from other adult beginners, most of whom said they owed their success to a teacher who didn't know the meaning of the term non-musician. The research I did for the book had another consequence. I became interested in finding other health professionals, scientists, and educators who might have something to say about the physical side of music making. In 1983, I met Professor Franz Roman at the University of Colorado in Denver, who's here with us today. He offered to help organize a conference in Denver called the Biology of Music Making, which was held in 1984. This was so successful that we decided to do a second, Music and Child Development, held again in Denver in the summer of 1987. And just 2 weeks ago, we held our third conference, Music, Growth, and Aging, at the University of Rochester. We have published books based on the 2 conferences I described and are now working on the manuscript for the third. One of the important outcomes of the Biology of Music Making conferences has been the clarification of an agenda for building on what has already been learned. I am submitting to you today, as an example of such a proposal for a Music Development Research Institute, which we prepared last year as part of a long-range development plan involving a number of interested institutions. In conclusion, I would like to tell you about my hopes for the future. We have much to learn about music in human life. We need better ways to bring artists, scientists, medical practitioners, and educators together more effectively. I cannot say enough to praise the commitment to interdisciplinary research and education which exists at the University of Rochester, where the Eastman School of Music and the School of Medicine and Dentistry have formally established programs to sponsor new work and to foster new careers linking music with biologic, behavioral, and medical science, and where studies on aging and health already represent a high research priority. Similar efforts are being discussed and planned at the University of Colorado in Denver, the University of California in San Francisco, and other universities. But these remain fledgling programs, and they deserve far greater recognition and support than is presently available. What you are doing here today could be an important first step in creating a national initiative for musical opportunity for our entire population. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Before I ask questions, I want to just mention and extend my appreciation for Senator Cohen for participating so thoroughly in today's hearing. For those of you in the audience who don't know, and many of you do, Senator Cohen has a particular interest in the arts. He is a part-time senator and a full-time author. He truly spends the same time we all do being a senator, but any spare time he has, he's an author, and he has a book that's fascinating called One-Eyed Kings, which I read as a gesture of friendship toward him, and then after I got through the first 3 or 4 pages, I did it because that's what I wanted to do. It was that exciting. He's a poet, and so anything dealing with the arts is something he has particular interest in. So, Bill, I appreciate very much your being here today and allowing us to use your expertise. We are going to work together to try to do some of the things that this hearing has brought to our minds. And you, Dr. Wilson, I appreciate a lot your outlining some of the studies that we could conduct that would be beneficial. You outlined those in some detail, and it gives us pinpointed subjects that we can spend a few dollars on that would save, in effect, this government with Medicare and other programs hundredfold, I'm sure, of what we would spend on those small programs. So I appreciate that direction. And that statement in your record, and all your records will be made part of the record in their entirety. That testimony, and the reason I saved you till last, it outlines specifically what we as a Congress needs to do to project out some of this musical therapy and music and making people well. So thank you very much for your diligence in that regard. Dr. Lee, do you really think musical therapy can save on federal expenditures? And if so, why do you say that?
The answer is yes, and I will give you an example. If one looks at the amount of medication that's given in nursing homes, primarily they would fall into 2 categories, one to help a patient sleep and the other to reduce pain. It is my contention and my clinical observations up to this point in time that if we play music or any form of creative arts will reduce the amount of medication that's given. What I would like to do then is to translate this money that's saved from the pharmacy department and use it to hire a music therapist.
Dr. Lee, then it's fair to say that music therapy is totally underutilized, if in fact it's utilized at all, by doctors, hospitals, extended care facilities. Isn't that true?
Yes, and I think that this hearing will add light to this dimension. I have told music therapists many times that to break into the medical center of a hospital circle is awfully difficult, when particularly in our budget crisis now, and they're going to say, why should I hire a music therapist when I need a nurse or other things? And they don't look at cost containment, unfortunately.
And that's one of the primary reasons, of course. By not doing so, we're penny wise and pound foolish.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Clare, what you see is so much more meaningful than what someone tells you. And we saw what you can do. It's magic. Is there any other way to describe what you're able to do with music?
Actually, I think through very careful observation and trying to notice the very slight responses, we've been able to tap residual skills and abilities that were not evident before. And through our research with looking at what kinds of things elderly persons can do, particularly those who are demented, we've been able to build on that knowledge base. So I'm not sure it's just magic.
As a music therapist with extensive experience that you have, would you tell us, in your own words, some of the ways that music therapy improves the lives of older Americans?
It does probably provide quality of life by giving opportunities for successful experience, for social integration, for some of those opportunities that have been lost through physical restrictions, through various other kinds of disabilities, and also through the types of contacts that older people lose even if they are well. For instance, their friends die, they may have to relocate, they may often move to the town where their children live. There are all kinds of reasons why they lose the social contact. We've already heard from physicians about the physiological responses that happen, and a lot of those we don't clearly understand yet. So I think probably the social, the physical, and the emotional opportunities to express, to share, to interact with others, to have feelings of belonging, and to just basically have opportunities for self-expression that may not otherwise be there.
One last question. Are there schools that give degrees in musical therapy?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about them. Are there many?
There are, I believe, over 40. The University of Kansas had the first degree program in 1946. And it's been there for a very long time. These schools are spread throughout the country. Some of them offer the basic bachelor's degree, but there are several that offer the master's degree, and there are 5 that offer the doctoral program, PhD.
One.
Mr. Chairman, I've been sitting here thinking how I can respond in a modest way to an overly generous statement made by the chairman. And I think that there are probably 3 ways. There's the Harvard way, the Yale way, and the Maine way. And the Harvard way was typified by A. Lawrence Lowell, who said that flattery is like nicotine, not harmful unless deeply inhaled. The Yale way was expressed by Robert Maynard Hutchins, who said that upon being introduced one time. He said that was the most thoroughly researched, the most eloquently delivered, and the most richly deserved introduction that I've ever had. The Maine way would simply say to thank you for your generosity, far more generous than just. Music, in a way, is very much like poetry. They're interrelated. Robert Frost said that every poem is a stay against the confusion of the world. And I think that that is particularly true of music as well. It's a stay against that confusion and the disorder and sometimes the chaotic existence that we all experience. And when we listen to music, we hear that harmony. And that, I think, is what brings us the kind of serenity or peace or spirituality that is often missing in our lives. And I also agree with Dr. Wilson that we're all musical, but it depends very much on how it's taught. I was taught at a very young age, and I rebelled against it. I had an instructor who insisted I play classical music, and all I wanted to play was jazz. And we didn't get along well at all. And I finally ended up dropping the instruction because we used to fight every time. I wanted to play 5'2" and Eyes of Blue, and he wanted me to play the Blue Danube or something of that nature. So I agree with you that a lot depends on how it's taught. It also ties into what the witnesses have been saying today, that it's important that we, in using this as therapy, understand how to use it, how to apply it, and what is the best type of music for a given individual. And we didn't have time to really look into much of the work that you've done, Dr. Clare, in terms of seeing the dramatic responses. But I assume for all of the therapists, and I assume that most of those who were cheering the audience a moment ago are engaged in musical therapy of one kind or another, would agree that that's something that we need to focus on, the special aspect of that kind of training. I assume also, Dr. Wilson, that there may be some difference. You have touched upon music therapy as far as directing it toward children or young people versus those that are older. Is there a basic difference in that kind of therapy?
Well, I think the way I'd like to respond to your question is by enlarging the idea of music therapy, both in the sense that music therapy is really an extension of something that's a basic opportunity for learning. In a letter that Professor Roman wrote to Mr. Edelstein, he said both music education and music therapy are paths which converge on human wellness and vitality in later life. They, like Watson and Crick's double helix, can be two fundamental strands of a comprehensive preventive therapeutic model which provides pleasurable physical and mental activity as well as social contact for many of our senior citizens. And it's true of children as well. But I want to just, if I may briefly, call your attention to a video which was submitted to you, which we don't have time to show, which introduces another element of the possibility of the use of music therapy, and that has to do with a patient who had a spinal cord tumor, who is a patient of mine, and who, by all rights, should be not only wheelchair-bound but bedridden, but she is not only not wheelchair-bound and bedridden, but rides a bicycle and is on roller skates. And she actually began her own program at the suggestion of a neurophysiologist at the University of California, Los Angeles, who said that she really should be doing small rhythmic exercises for short periods of time. And having been a string bass player before, she said, well, that sounds like music to me. She made her own exercises up, and she is now, despite the fact that she is, in essence, her brain is disconnected from the lower part of her spinal cord, looks to all practical purposes to be completely normal. Now, if that's the case, to respond to your question to Dr. Lee, Senator Reed, in terms of economics, if what we learned from this patient could be applied to the enormous population of younger people with spinal cord injuries, the savings in restoration to some kind of mobility is simply incalculable. And I'm happy to report that our conference at the University of Rochester, we had an early report from a music therapist who has made the plunge into studying neurophysiology and working with patients with spinal cord injuries using musical stimulation. So that's another potentially very important use of music therapy, which also simply does not respect the question specifically of age. Another issue that I would like to just add to this thought, because this is my own experience, the relative newness and unfamiliarity of music therapy in general hospitals. I was responsible for the introduction of music therapy into a general hospital where I work in California, simply by inviting a music therapist to participate in the hospice program, the patients who are being cared for malignancies. Interestingly, there was no resistance to her joining the staff because she wasn't competing with anyone. The sad story is that when patients have fatal illnesses, that the doctors suddenly are out of town. I'm sorry to say that about my profession, but the fact is that that happens. And the music therapist working with hospice patients, and indeed with one of my own patients, turned out to make a very significant contribution to this man's care. One thing that happened was that a patient with a malignant brain tumor, who was my patient and who was being seen by the music therapist, had finally withdrawn from all communication, not only with me, but with his family. And after the music therapist came in, she was able to reach him, to draw him out. And I remember the last interview that I had with him was one in which a discussion about whether he should have a second round of chemotherapy was raised. And instead of simply sitting there as though he was not a participant, he became very emotional, and even though he was aphasic, he had lost the ability to communicate meaningfully with language, he was able to indicate exactly what it was that he wanted. So he actually was brought back into the family, physician, patient interaction in a very important way. I think we really haven't begun to scratch the surface. We've not begun to see really what the basic physiology of music is. I think that I'd like to have a conversation with Mickey Hart about where the rhythmic impulse comes from, because in fact the leading edge of neurophysiologic research now has to do with the generation of rhythmic physiology in the brain. I see a very happy future. I think that you gentlemen and ladies in the Congress and the Senate could help a great deal by simply legitimizing this effort and the concept.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson. And we're nearing the end of the hearing itself, but I wanted to say how helpful this has been. I remember years ago, when it came to dealing with the elderly, we had a solution was simply to put people in nursing homes. And at that time, I recall Senator Percy, who was serving in the Senate at that time, and he referred to warehousing the dying. And there was very little being done at that time in trying to stimulate the elderly, but rather just to put them where it would be convenient for their relatives to visit them and to care for them physically. But nothing was really being done, or enough being done, for the spiritual side or the physical side. There was too much dependency upon drugs to kill the pain and dealing with their particular problems, or to keep them quiet or whatever. And that led to a series of investigations by the Aging Committee as such, or a Senate committee, as well as the House, the formulation of or the forming of a House Select Committee on Aging, as well as one in the Senate. And I think we've come quite a long way since that time in just dealing not only with physical rehabilitation, but we've come to a different level, or we're coming to a different level now. And that's to see the importance of the mental side, the spiritual side, and the role that something, not only music, but the entire field of meditation, which they're doing quite a vast array of experiments now in terms of finding out what role the mind plays in curing disease or helping to cure disease. So we've got a whole new universe of experience that has to be explored yet. And I think this hearing has been particularly helpful. And as you said, Dr. Wilson and others have said, what can we do? We can help give it credibility, but our own credibility rests upon the quality of the people who come before us. And so we thank all of you for coming and being part of the panelists who are here to lend credibility to this inquiry into new and, I think, very productive ways of dealing with our elderly.
Thank you, Senator Cohen. This concludes the hearing today. It has been a first in many ways, and we're going to have another first. I'm going to ask Ken Medema, an experienced performer, as we know, and a musical therapist. He'll conclude this hearing with a song summarizing what we've heard. I believe this is the first hearing in the United States Senate history to conclude with a musical coda. Go ahead and make history.
I'm growing old, and help me stay young. Let the music be played, let the songs now be sung. Back in Indiana, we never really did know there were folks like music therapists round. Such a thing to learn today. I had a stroke, and look at me now. I learned to play the music somehow. Whoever thought we'd see it in the halls of Congress today? There is music playing and songs being sung. It must be the start of something brand new. So I'm growing old. Help me stay forever young.
Well, I had the idea not very long ago to set up this entire hearing. It was only about a month and a half, and remarkably enough, in 1.5 months, we were able to bring together just a perfect panel that in 3 hours explained, in essence, to the senators that were assembled, and as well to the nation that was watching and through television and radio and the newspapers, what music therapy is, why it's effective, and that it's something much more than entertainment, that it can actually heal people and can be used as medicine. That brief message did get through because we had so much help putting it together in such a short period of time. The National Association of Music Therapy and others, Norm Goldberg, a variety of people came from all over the country and offered their assistance, helped call people, helped set people up, contacted the media. And the result was that in that period of time, we were able to bring together the leading experts in the country, have them do a quick summary, and really get the message across in a way that it was otherwise impossible. It was really a first in Senate history. The Senate had never before looked at something like this. They'd never before looked at music as a therapeutic tool. And in fact, when I first broached the idea with senators and with staff, I wasn't always taken seriously. The thought was that this can't be serious. What is music? You know, is something just for fun? Or is this a hearing just as an excuse to get Mickey Hart here from the Grateful Dead? And they didn't realize that, in fact, Mickey Hart was far more than just a celebrity, but he's a very educated, erudite scholar of the history of music and history of drumming. So I had to convince them. And so the challenge for me during this hearing was to convince the people that thought it was a joke, the senators that didn't take it seriously, and everybody else who had questions or doubts about whether or not this was a serious topic, whether or not medicine and health and music were able to be combined, and turn it all around. And as a matter of fact, after the hearing today, everybody says they're convinced. It's the truth of it came out. That's what it is. I mean, the truth is that medicine and music are very similar. And nobody else bought that before, but now after 3 hours, a lot of people do, including some of the senators who admitted, I think, during the ceremony itself, during the hearing, that they didn't know if it was really a serious topic, and they just wanted to come check it out. But by the end, they were convinced, and that was because of the quality of the witnesses that we had that put across the message, and the quality of interest on the part of the senators really listening and having an open mind and being willing to think about whether or not this is a possibility that music can be healing. It was easy because Senator Cohen, who's the ranking minority member, of course, is a poet, an artist himself, so he had a quick, intuitive understanding of this, and I think he was extremely eloquent. Senator Reid I brought along, and by the end he's completely convinced, and he says, well, what are we going to do now? I'm on the Appropriations Committee, I want appropriations, I want to set up a program, we want legislative action, I want to follow through and make something happen. Senator Cohen is willing to lend a hand on that. Other senators that were involved. So the result of this isn't just that we got national public awareness increased about what music therapy is, but also that we're going to be able to move a step further to getting some federal help and assistance to improve research. Long-range future through some of the even larger federal programs like Medicare and the other health programs. So this is just the beginning of I think, a long series of actions here. I mean, I can't promise large scale. Government's basically broke, as some of the senators mentioned, but what's just pocket change to these guys is still a lot of money in the context of what this growing field is, and I think we can get some seed money in there, we can get more research done, and to help move the field along. And it's always important to increase public awareness, because a lot of people out there don't know what music therapy is, I found. And a few more people, maybe a few million, maybe a few 100,000, maybe a few thousand, some more people are going to know what it is now than knew before. And if that happens, we've accomplished something. And hopefully, if as a result of this hearing, even a few people, a few hundred people, a few thousand people, whatever, take up an instrument and learn how to play piano or learn how to play a violin late in life, despite the fact they might be over age 50. Heaven forbid they learn an instrument then. If they learn how to play one, then we've added a little bit more music in the world, we've added more music in their lives, and boy, I feel like we've really, it's worth our effort to put into this.